Arthur Phillip was a British Royal Navy officer who came to Australia with the first fleet. He was the first governor of New South Wales, led the colonization of what is now Australia, and founded the British penal colony that later became the city of Sydney. He saw firsthand the differences between the British and Aboriginals, and the indigenous reaction to westernization.
So upon settling Australia, what were some issues with the indigenous population that you faced?
Personally, I adopted a policy of mutual respect with the local population, although the Aboriginals inhabiting the land remained highly wary of us. They rebuffed many of our attempts to establish friendly connections. The issue was that our cultures were so different, from small aspects such as our clothing and etiquette to our entire governmental and religious belief system, that the Aboriginal people were reluctant and unable to become assimilated. My fellow governors in other regions such as Tasmania endured conflicts with the natives, as many saw our settlements and the imposition of our beliefs as an invasion of their land.
How would you say that British colonization improved the land through westernization?
The pre-existing culture was nomadic and rudimentary. There was no central leader, and the country consisted of separate wandering tribes that subsisted upon what resources they could come by. It is no doubt that they were ancient people with their own vibrant art and belief system, and were highly skilled at hunting and gathering, but their way of life in terms of government and economy was very basic in comparison to that of European civilization. So how did we improve upon this? Firstly, the English language was introduced and became the main language of Australia. There were no longer different dialects, so the law and constitution could be established and laid out in English, one language. A democratic parliamentary system of government modelled on the Westminster system was implemented, as well as a military, police and civil service based upon British models. Educational institutions such as boarding schools and universities were built, modelled on Oxford and Cambridge, and these offered high-quality education. Aboriginal children were encouraged to attend school in which English values were taught, but this was not a success, which contributed further to their alienation. Settlers, therefore, ran the country. Through farming and mining of raw materials, Australia came to have its own economy as part of the larger British one, and this provided workers with steady jobs and salaries.
At what cost to the indigenous community did this happen?
Firstly, along with convicts came smallpox, measles, influenza, venereal diseases, and more. These illnesses decimated the indigenous population as they were completely foreign, so there was no chance of locals having immunity to them. This resulted in a rapid population decline, making white settlers the prevalent race. Some Aboriginals were forcefully taken from their communities in order to be raised in a westernized environment by white foster families. Native families were torn apart, and quite often the children raised with Western values did not show any substantial differences from those who were not taken. Additionally, discrimination towards Aboriginals was widespread, as their dress, skin color, and living standards were so different from the settlers. As a result of this, many were unemployed or took up substance abuse. Alcohol and drugs were a major problem for the indigenous community. Overall, I think that they were unsuccessful in adapting to our culture, and as tends to happen with westernization, were left behind in progress because of it.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was an Indian activist who supported the philosophy of non-violence and passive resistance. He was known as a Mahatma in South Asia, which translates to a holy person or sage. He had first-hand experience of the British Raj. He became a leading figure in the Indian independence movement to gain independence from the British, and he also participated in the formation of the modern Indian government. Let's ask him about what he thinks were the effects of westernization on India.
What were some of the hardships Indians faced under the British rule?
Although the British positively impacted India's infrastructure, there were many ways in which my people were mistreated. Firstly, taxation. Not only were the British robbing us of our gold and jewelry, but were also mismanaging taxes, where my people had to pay a very high amount of tax, which led to them living in poverty. Secondly, textile production. Indigo was a huge reason why my country was very important to the British. Indigo poisoned the soil, and the British made the farmers plant indigo and indigo only. This resulted in corroded soil, which required a minimum of 2 years to recover. This reduced the quality of future crops, therefore making farmers poor. The larger effect of this was that it resulted in a huge decrease in the growth of the Indian economy. Not only did they make us grow indigo, but also jute, sugarcane, cotton, coffee, and tea. Thirdly, the infamous divide and rule. The British came up with a plan to divide us Indians to make us weaker. Often they would cause conflicts among states and religions. The British Raj slowly built upon this Hindu-Muslim conflict, using the division between the two groups to their advantage. The lack of unity among the population meant it could be controlled.
How would you say the British rule has positively impacted India and Indians?
The British imperialization has definitely positively influenced India's infrastructure. Many railway tracks and trains were created by the East India Railway Company, and paved roads, which also allowed easier transportation for the general public. Obviously, this was partially so that transporting Indian goods would be easier for the British, but it also helped the general public and India itself, after it became independent. There also wasn't a single uniform language used for political issues. Therefore, the British opened many schools to teach children English and other forms of studies. This benefited the youth of India, and it was a leading cause in an increase in employment rates and competent workers. The British introduced technology to India in the form of weaponry and factories. These factories used advanced technology and brought mass production to India. Agricultural technology was also made available to the farmers, making crops more nourished and available.
Do you think that as an alumnus of the British educational system, you were naturally biased toward their way of doing things?
I am certainly highly appreciative of the organization of the British and the education I have been given. It is true that I am an advocate of fundamental democracy and other Western-oriented ideals, but nevertheless, a line must be drawn in the sand when it comes to interfering in the affairs of another country. With Britain monopolizing all its resources, India could not grow as a nation. On the whole, there must be a limit to Western control of foreign nations.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi, for your time.
Xi Jinping is the current General Secretary of the Communist Party of China. He was elected in 2013, 35 years after the implementation of Deng Xiaoping's revolutionary Western economic reforms. As its leader, Xi Jinping is witnessing the effects of Westernization on China in a period of rapid globalization and ever-expanding trade. To this day, many in China remain divided over whether these Western influences are affecting it positively or negatively. Let's hear Mr. Jinping's views.
How would you define Westernization?
Westernization for me is just another term for globalization. Slowly, the West seems to be attempting to create a global homogeneity in culture, economics, politics, and religion. Forms of media such as the internet, radio, and television are becoming saturated with advertisements for Western innovations, music, entertainment, and values. People worldwide wear clothes worn by their favorite TV show characters and shape their lives based upon the Western perception of success. This brings me to my second point. Citizens of the world are increasingly finding themselves at the mercy of capitalism and the billion-dollar corporations that dominate the market. The majority of these corporations are of Western origin with huge spheres of influence worldwide, enabling Western countries to financially control the lives of millions of people outside their geographical reach. This is the essence of Westernization, supplying countries with Western products, broadcasting Western social and political views, and encouraging cultures to adopt Western values.
Has China become more westernized since 1949?
In order for our country to achieve its true financial potential, it was necessary to adopt some economic aspects of Western countries. These, combined with our own socialist policies, have helped create a medium between the ideology of Chairman Mao and Western capitalism, a third way, if you will. This westernized approach, combined with our own beliefs, has made us one of the most powerful countries in the world. Since 1949, it is evident that the culture of China has also been heavily impacted by Western countries. Trade with Western countries has introduced many of their products to the Chinese market. Many Chinese own more Western products than products made in China itself. Some examples of Western goods in China are iPhones, McDonald's, and even Walmart. These have been great successes and are still rapidly accumulating a Chinese fan base. As a result of this, China is becoming more and more reliant on Western products and more intertwined with Western culture.
In what ways would you say Westernization has benefited and harmed China?
China has certainly grown economically due to the incorporation of market characteristics into its economy. Over the past 30 years, China has been the world's most rapidly growing economy and is now the leading country worldwide in trade. Employing Western technological innovations in areas such as production, medicine, and agriculture has facilitated this economic expansion and improved the quality of life for millions of Chinese citizens. However, there is a downside. Traditional Chinese culture is slowly being eroded. Western fast food chains and supermarket goods have resulted in a huge change in the average Chinese diet. Traditional Chinese dress is no longer worn. In fact, I'm wearing a Western suit right now. Instead, Chinese people wear Western clothing and follow Western fashion trends. The youth of China is also becoming increasingly influenced by Western countries. High schools in China now eagerly wait for the next episode of their favorite American TV show. Now this allows our youth to better understand Western culture, but at the expense of understanding our own. The West has helped China grow in many ways, but also threatens to destroy traditional Chinese values, something which must be prevented at all costs.
Thank you, Xi Jinping, for your time.